Live in quarantine from her house, here's today's host, Ashley Black.
Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode of The Fresh Take. I'm Ashley Black of Jet Fresh Flower Distributors, and today we're speaking with a very special guest. He is the president of a world-renowned garden rose farm in Bogota, Colombia, and it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to the president of Alexandra Farms, Mr. Jose Azout.
Well, thank you for that introduction.
No, thank you. I'm going to call you Joey because I know you as Joey. I think most of us do. It's such a pleasure to have you here today and to speak with you. Before we get started on how you guys are doing at the farm, I want to first ask a little bit about yourself and your background for people who don't know you. How did you get into it? Let me know. Go ahead.
Well, I started in 1989 in a small mini carnation farm in Bogota called Maxima Farms. The small mini carnation farm became rather large. We opened up an importer in Miami in the 90s, along with 4 or 5 other farms that did the same. It was the booming years of the flowers when you had Importers Row on 89th Court, where Esmeralda Farms was, Flower Trading Corporation, Continental Farms. All of that went in different ways when USA Floral bought out companies. We witnessed that. Maxima was bought by USA Floral. Then I worked for Gerald Stevens, I worked for Dole, and in 2005 we started Alexandra Farms. We were looking to get back to those roses that actually opened in the vase and that had a fragrance, and we didn't really know if we were going to find them or not, but we decided to go out looking, and we did. We did find some. We found David Austin, who was launching a garden rose line, and there were other breeders like Mayande in France that had varieties that had these characteristics and also had the vase life, because it was very important to get the vase life. There were garden roses already available, but they wouldn't ship well. They wouldn't last long at all. But we were able to find those, and that's how we got started in 2006. So that's 14 years now.
That's amazing.
December of 2005, we planted the first plants. We had production in 2006.
That's incredible. And what's the size of your farm? Would you consider it a boutique, or do you guys consider yourself large scale?
Well, we started off with 2 hectares, and we did 2 hectares for about 5 years because we had to figure out how to grow each one of these individual varieties. They weren't production varieties, that they weren't developed for productivity or for greenhouse growing. They were developed for gardens and for beauty and for fragrance, and each one has its own style of growth. Some grew very tall, and we had to figure out how to keep them low. Some grew very low, and we had to figure out how to get them tall. So we struggled for the first couple of years. We struggled with the production. Then we struggled with the marketing of it, Ashley. People today say, wow, Joe, you guys were visionaries. And the truth is, we were trial and error, and we were hit in the face several times. I remember, our buyers telling us, Joey, your flowers are for weddings. And me thinking, weddings? Who wants to do weddings? The weddings must be a tiny little market there. No, we got approved for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Things like that happened to us. And through the years, after lots of struggles, we finally figured it out. We figured out what the market was about. We figured out what the pricing could be. We figured out how to grow them. And then in about 2010, 2012, we started growing. We got the David Austin license. We had already 30 or 40 varieties. And nowadays we're at 20 hectares. That was pre-coronavirus.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the coronavirus has just been devastating for us. And in order to keep some of the farm alive with 10% of the income, we've gone down to about 17 or 16 hectares, which is still by far the largest garden rose farm there is, but it's far away from the 22 hectares we got to be.
Wow. So you've already begun downsizing. What else have you been doing in the wake of COVID-19?
Yeah, we saw ourselves in a situation where our sales went down by 95%. We really needed to do something to survive, and from the first day we said our objective is to survive these times so that we can get people their jobs back so we can continue to have a social meaningfulness in Bogota. What do we have to do in order to survive? And at that point, we had to let go of some of the employees. We had to downsize the farm. Um, we had to reduce payroll. So all the executives and the administration are getting reduced salaries at this point. And everybody, it's been surprising and comforting to see everybody appreciating what we're doing. Even the people that we've let go are so understanding, and it's a kind of furlough thing that we're using, and so people are so happy that their name is still there. We're still paying their social security. We're still paying their health insurance, and that they have a job once we get back to normal. And people, rather than being sad, they were just appreciative and thankful that they still have a job at some point. And that's been very, very heartwarming because it's one of the hardest things to do. When you spend your career constructing things, creating and making, and suddenly you have to go back and destroying, it's just really harsh.
Absolutely. And yeah, as a president, owner of a company, I mean, yeah, you treat everybody as one of your own. So I completely understand. I think a lot of flower companies are going through the same thing.
Many,
Yeah.
many are doing very similar adaptations to this terrible situation.
Yeah. Do you feel like the amount of your business has shortened because businesses have closed, or they're just not buying as much because of the
Well,
time has changed?
we're hit by a double whammy at Alexandra Farms. First, there's no events, and our major U.S. market were weddings and events, and there are none. So that's, and then of course a lot of wholesalers have just shut down for the time being.
Yeah.
So if there even if there aren't events, there's some business out there, but wholesalers aren't opening up their doors. They closed down for a lot of March and the beginning of April. Now they're starting back up, but I imagine that florists are also, their sales have been reduced significantly. Their opening up is going to entail some additional costs, which they may not want to incur until the demand comes back. The whole chain is in a coma.
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
we are seeing some awakening. Not only are we seeing the few customers that have been buying a little bit more, but we're also seeing more customers go online, and that's encouraging. And I think it'll continue. How slowly or how quickly, of course, is the question. Um, Perhaps if we're optimistic, we can think that the $1 trillion the government gave is going to allow wholesalers to open up again, florists to open up again. Maybe the events will just be postponed and not canceled, and we'll have a great August and September and October, and that's what we have to hope for, and that's what we're prepared for.
Yeah. You're more focused on the events more so than Mother's Day. Mother's Day, would you say, is a significant holiday, or are people generating interest because they need flowers still?
Mother's Day is not very big for us,
Yeah,
but we do feel a bump, and we do sell out.
of course.
We are feeling a bump now. I'm just hoping that right after Mother's Day, we're not going to just go back to the doldrums, but that we'll continue, and that'll give us the inertia. The people who open are going to stay open and stay. And it's really interesting how the entire supply chain, from the grower in Bogota, the truck line in Bogota, the airlines, the freight forwarders, the importers, the wholesalers, all of this chain depends on the creativity of the retail florist to get out there and sell our flowers.
Yeah,
And the more creative they are in these times, the more they're supporting the entire chain. So we're seeing, deliveries and contact-free buying in flower shops, and we really encourage florists to go out there and be creative because we're all counting on them.
definitely, definitely. And I saw that you guys are also being creative in how you're operating as well to stay, preventing this virus from spreading. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is you guys are doing?
Sure. A good majority of our employees live in a city close by called Tocancipá, and they bike to the farm. So there's no problem. But a couple of buses that we have that bring people from a bit further have been, we're only a third of the seats are filled out. And they're all wearing masks on the. And then when they arrive at the farm, they drive through. If they're on their bike or walking, they walk through a disinfection greenhouse, a tunnel
Yes.
that has some sprays of alcohol and Lysol and stuff like that, and they walk through to disinfect. And then there's only 4 people in a block at the same time. And the post-harvest, there's a empty table in between every table, and all of the CDC requirements are being fulfilled. But thank goodness we're in the agricultural world, so we have an exemption to stay-home rules, and we can actually do the work.
About how many people do you have on staff right now? I know that you
About
guys
150.
150. Wow. And normally on a regular basis, how many do you normally have?
350.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is.
Has there been any opportunities with shipping right now, or is the shipping still running normally?
Yeah, it's a crippled um, infrastructure right now. The airlines aren't flying with the same frequency to the different destinations. The flights are slow to get full because there isn't that much volume. So yeah, flowers are getting out there, but it isn't as easy as it used to be. They have less frequency and more expensive delays and that sort of thing. But flowers are getting out there. If the florist sells a bunch, the supply chain will serve it somehow.
Is there a schedule as to when they're going out, or something that for buyers to know?
Well, in general, frequency like Amsterdam that had 6 flights a week now has 2.
Wow.
But those 2 flights a week aren't leaving at exactly the right time. They're a little bit delayed. So it's 2 with delays.
I see.
I'd say maybe 40% of the flights are going.
I see. Are we expecting any kind of delays for Mother's Day in general, just because of the busyness of the holiday for the rest of Bogota?
I'm sure there'll be pressure and delays and things, but the flowers will get to the market. It's in everybody's interest.
Yeah. Are you guys working with like a Soco Florist or any organizations on how to stay operating? Are they doing anything for you guys?
Yes, it's hard to be on the roads in Bogota right now because there's the stay-at-home quarantine rules in Colombia are much stricter than the States. Nobody can go out except for certain things, and they check your social security number, and if it's an even number, you can only go out certain days. If it's an odd number, you can go out other days.
Wow.
And people who are arriving, well, they used to arrive on flights because now the airport's closed, but when they started flights, they were asked to stay in quarantine, and they were monitored in quarantine. It's serious. So to get our trucks out to the airport, we need certain permissions, and Azout of Alexandra has been very helpful in making sure that all of that flows well. We have the government agencies that give us phytosanitary certificates and export certificates, and all of that is going well thanks to Azout of Alexandra.
That's wonderful. That's really great to know. Yeah, that's. Well, I mean, we don't want to think about so much of what's going on right now, right? We want to look towards the future and see, what's out there. And I'm curious because, obviously, weddings and events, you guys are the creme de la creme of what you offer and what you put out there. And I mean, you guys are always innovating with something new. Is there something that, you want to talk to?
Yes.
Yes.
That's a great question. March was a depressing month, and we were just destroying things left and right and deciding what to cut down and who to let go and what markets to stop serving because they were too hard and they had no logistics. But about a week ago, we took the decision that we were going to continue with the introduction of new varieties that we planned before the virus pandemic. So in 2021, we will see 6 new spray rose varieties, some of them from the Wabara brand, which might already be in the market via Amsterdam. A couple of varieties called Ayo Fuga and Ayo Solo. They're these sand and metallic colors that are so popular now. Yeah. So we'll have 6 of those. We're going to have 10 pre-commercial varieties to start getting feedback from the market. So all of the innovation is going forward. And that's something exciting and something to look forward to.
What was the push or the motivation to get into sprays? I mean, because you guys normally just do, giant cuts. So
yes. We're convinced. We were convinced that the U.S. market didn't like sprays as much as other markets, and it's always been 10% of the rose business, or maybe 5% of the rose business, depending on who you ask. But we found these colors, Ashley, that are so fabulous. They're so great. They're so what the market is using right now that it didn't matter whether they're sprays or not. It's the color that's going to sell them.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about giving the experience and the color story.
Right.
And what would you say is, I mean, the experience that Alexandra Farms gives to their roses? I mean, I think romance, but like, I mean, you know, is there a bigger story to the variety and the sizes and everything, or, you know?
Well, our pitch in the beginning, and I think we still use it in some places, is bring back the romance. Bring back the romance of fragrance and shape and performance in the vase that roses used to have.
Yeah.
And we've always, I mean, what makes us special, well, a lot of things make us special, I like to think, but one of the main things is the innovation and varieties that we do. And we have a very big department of new variety testing. There's all kinds of beautiful garden roses out there, but the ones that have the vase life and the shipping and the performance are the ones we look for. And it takes a lot of time, a lot of travel, a lot of tests and trials. And that machine of ours that is continually trying new varieties and identifying new things all over the world is producing tremendous varieties that, of course, a year later other farms carry, but that take us 10 years to find and to develop and to test and to try. And we're still going with that. We have over 60 varieties today, when 5 years ago we must have had 30.
Wow, wow. And you guys do so great with your testing and getting feedback from the audience. And, you know, I love when you have little stickers and, you know, do you like this one or is this one an A? And my favorite one is that green spray rose.
Yes.
Yes, you and I think everybody.
We're the only ones in the world that like that. We should call it Ashley.
If there wasn't already an Ashley, I agree.
An Ashley.
We should definitely call it Ashley. That one's going to be one of the new sprays. Is that right?
That's going to be, that one has actually launched this year. There's production now, very small, but there is production now, and I'm really crossing my fingers for that because it was a hard sell for nobody likes it except me and you, and so we have to push it somehow and make it work.
I know. I definitely feel the pressure. Like, you got to send it to me, and I need to just, you know, be all over it. But no, I thought it was really cool. The color, you know, people are looking for these colored roses now, and it had such a beautiful shade of green, and the way that it opened it was like a nice cup, and you could just tell that it was going to give you a good show and open up. And honestly, I didn't think it was, you know, a spray. I just thought it was maybe a smaller garden rose, which is really cool about your varieties. It's all that different size. So would you say they're going to be, you know, they're going to open up, right? These sprays are not just going to be little tiny little heads. These are going to be.
They open up, but in the case of Midori, it's not only a spray rose. It's a very particular kind of spray rose, which makes it even harder to sell because it's so innovative. I mean, it's relatively small compared to regular sprays. It's more of a filler than it is a focal flower.
Okay.
But it's the color that I think is gonna be used to bring out the other colors around them. I mean, if you put a peach with this green, the peach is gonna just shine, and I'm hoping that that's what people are gonna use it for. And of course, it has tremendous wow value because anybody who sees this is like, wow, what is that? You know.
Great contrast.
And I think that as Alexandra Farms we have to continue to innovate in the market. And yes, we're going to be wrong sometimes, as we have been a lot in the past. But sometimes we're going to be right, and that innovation, that we're always innovating, that is our personality, that is what keeps us in front of everybody else, is something we have to continue to develop and work on, even if there are mistakes. Alexandra Farms has new products that can be great tools for florists and designers, or maybe they're flops, but some of them will be good.
I have no doubt.
And I think designers will appreciate that because in this industry, very few people innovate. So it's easier to copy whatever's selling now. Let's make more of it and not try something new. But I think florists and designers want new things, and if the more creative we can be in what we innovate, the more creative the designers will be. And we are a team that creates beauty. We both need each other.
Definitely. As far as your inspiration goes, because, like you said, you get flowers from Japan and, all these different kinds of countries that influence the world so greatly. What, for Alexandra Farms, where do you guys find inspiration regionally?
Um, Turns out that in 2010, 2011, Japan was our second largest market.
Okay.
And I always wanted to go to Japan. So there's a trade show there every year. And we put up a stand there. And it was fabulous. I mean, the country is just terrific. But at the show, we noticed that a lot of the imported flowers were just like they are everywhere else. But in the local production, the varieties looked a lot like the varieties that we were growing. And I hadn't seen that anywhere else.
Okay.
I didn't even know it existed anywhere else. So I remember going up to a small Japanese man who was in front of a table that had about 6 vases of one bloom each, and there were 6 varieties on there that there was some of the most beautiful varieties I've ever seen in my life. And there was one of them in front of a. So I went and I introduced myself, and the Japanese man did not speak a word of English. I didn't speak a word of sushi. Is the only last word I know, and so nothing happened. I left him my card. I got his. I emailed him a couple of times. So the next year, the same man with the same 6 varieties and the same problem happened. And on the third year, I brought a translator. I brought somebody from the Embassy of Colombia, and all 3 of us started talking to this man. We finally got something back, and he says, no, I don't want to deal with anybody outside of Japan. Japan. So the guy from the Embassy of Colombia gave him his card, and the Japanese man was very impressed that it said Embassy of Colombia. It was like an official. And so suddenly his whole demeanor changed, and he became a salesperson.
Okay.
And he said, well, look at these varieties that I have, and look at this. And that's how we finally started developing the Japanese varieties that we have now. And this was in 2012, so it's been 7 years. Now we must have 8 varieties that are called the Princess line. Princess Maya, Princess Sakura, Princess Meiko, Princess Aiko. All of these varieties are from these kinds of small farms in the hills of Japan where the grandfather breeds, the son grows, and the grandson sells.
Really?
And they're maybe 2 or 3 acre farms, and they breed for themselves. It's amazing. It's amazing. And the flowers are beautiful. And of course, in Colombia, they're huge, and their head size is tremendous, and they're just really beautiful. Much prettier than they are in Japan.
Really? Do you think that's because of the altitude?
The weather and the altitude, absolutely. They have winter and summer there. So in the winter, they have no light, and so the head size is small. And then in the summer, it's too hot, and the head size is small. And so there's a couple of periods in the year where their production is actually very nice, but it's just 2 months in the year. We produce that quality all year.
Yeah, and that's where you guys shine. That's amazing. That's crazy. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, what's interesting is that the industry doesn't work that way. There's breeders that are established, and all the growers go to the established breeders and look up their books or their open houses, and they see the varieties and they test them and they grow. But nobody goes out to breeders that aren't already in the business to find these varieties. Of course, now that we found them, they're in the business now, so other people can buy from them. But that's kind of innovation that we bring to the market, and I think that when we partner with a florist who likes one of these varieties, we create great things for brides and great things for the world.
Yeah. How much you can hear the passion that you have for flowers, which is, I gotta say, it's my favorite part. Like, I mean, it's so amazing. How much of what you pick, or what you want to get into breeding, I'm growing, is just like a personal love of what you like versus a marketability? Like is it more of a, do you get excited, you have to approach it, or you think this is gonna sell and this is the way?
It's a combination of both.
Yeah.
There's lots of flowers that you immediately identify as hits. Although you may or may not like them as much, they're going to do well in the market, and you've got to plant them. And then there's others like Princess Midori, which nobody likes, but I love and you love. And you say, you know what, we're going to take a risk with this. Maybe the market will develop a taste for it, or maybe it'll become in fashion if we launch it. And we're going to take a risk, and you have to balance them both. And there are times, actually, when absolutely gorgeous varieties. We had one. We had a purple, a dark purple one. Nobody would do an event with it. It was dark purple. Maybe vampires would get married with that color, but nobody else.
No.
But it was so beautiful, and it was called Goethe, which is the German poet. That I mean, it's like an insult. Goethe. It's awful. And of course, the variety didn't sell at all, but it was so beautiful that we tried it for 3 years, trying to get people to buy it.
Wow.
But no, so it's a balance, and you have to balance out between what you love and what the market wants.
Yeah, but 3 years, that's a fair amount of time to give it a shot. Do you
Yeah.
normally give it that much time minimum, or have you, pulled out a variety and noticed?
Uh, no, we stick with them for a while because sometimes it's just stubbornness. It's so beautiful that you can't imagine why it's not selling well, and you just stick with it. Um, Even though customers are telling you, Joey, when the outside of the rose is light and the inside is dark, people think it's old.
Hmm.
And you say, yeah, okay, but let's do it anyway because it's so pretty.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's summer, but sometimes when the variety actually works in the long run, then it's satisfying because you say, oh, it beautiful. It is a great new tool for florists to use, and it wouldn't have been in existence had we been stubborn. But I like to think that when it fails, we were stubborn. But when we hit the right thing, then we're visionaries.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard because the trends are always changing, and maybe you grew something that wasn't in, and then later on it is, and that must be so frustrating. How
Well,
much? Yeah.
I'm always concerned about that. Right now, for example, we see the sand color fashion, right? So we've got quicksand, we've got amnesia, we've got Sahara sensation, we've got all of these sandy colors that are coming up, and a lot of these sprays, new ones, are also those sorts of colors. I'm so scared that by the time we have a great sand color collection, the market's going to want peach again or something.
I know, and sand has had its day. I mean, I don't think it's gonna
Which
go
one?
anywhere. Sand colors, just the
Yeah,
all the dusty rose.
right,
It's
right.
it's very in. I mean, I don't know if it's the new blush, or at this point it's kind of like people are like, well, I still want to keep blush and I still want my cream, but now sand goes in there too, and maybe you get those purple hues or something, and it's all about creating a blend and a story. Um, yeah, it's so hard to
Predict.
yeah, to predict and to
Yeah.
sway. Are you sick of something? Are you sick of a trend? Or you're like, no, because we're still growing it.
Am I sick of a trend?
Like some people are tired of the
Well, what I would like to see. No, I don't know. We have a couple of yellow varieties
yeah,
that are absolutely beautiful. Lemon pom pom opens up flat this big, and Catalina is a ball shaped, which a deep center. They're fabulous, but they don't sell very well because they're not wedding colors, and that's a shame. We also have a couple of oranges that are fantastic, but they don't sell very well because I guess you can't really change that.
yeah,
It's a shame though, and I hope that florists start using garden roses for their everyday work because florists need to differentiate themselves from supermarkets. And anybody can get a dozen roses in the supermarket for, I don't know, 12 or 15 bucks. But a florist has to sell it for 60. And they can only do that if they have something special, either a design or the flowers are special. And I think that garden roses fit that perfectly. You can't have these beautiful lemon pom pom varieties that are going to open up in the floor in the consumer's home with fragrance that they're not going to compare to a dozen at Walmart. And so I'm hoping that these colors, even though they're not wedding colors, will be popular in our line because they're such great performers. And florists could use them to differentiate themselves.
yeah. I think some of the reason why like those yellows and orange tones for like the wedding market, for example, it may get overlooked just because people are picking these colors for their sentimental reasons. It's pink is my favorite or peach is my favorite. So they pick those tones that's going to be for their big special day. But like you said, for florists, for, just a special occasion, it gives you a more world-round appreciation for color and for trying a different variety for an everyday occasion. You don't need something else high end. There's so many high end options.
Right.
Yeah, and garden rose is such a great substitute, right, for peonies, or if there's no orchids or whatever the story is.
They are, and I think that the shapes and that they change shapes when they're in the vase makes people get tired of them a lot slower than they would get tired of something else. And of course, the fragrance is just everybody smells a rose as soon as they receive it, and when they don't get that, you can see the disillusionment in their faces. 80% of our garden roses have some sort of fragrance, and I think that that adds a lot to liking something for the long run, not just for the novelty of it.
Creates a memory. I think smell
Yeah, that's
so much
true.
of that, right? Like
Yeah,
and it's just a whole experience.
yeah.
So exciting. I really appreciate all this time that you spent. Are there any other stories you said you wanted to?
Yes,
Go
there's a couple.
ahead. Go ahead.
One of the now that we were talking about fragrance, I was so impressed in Japan when I was looking for varieties. It turns out that florists had this little test tube that was compartmentalized, and when brides would come into their shop, they would ask them to smell the different parts of the test tube, and depending on what each one of the smells was a particular variety of roses. So they were picking the roses based on the smell on the fragrance of the variety, which I thought was so sophisticated. They had set up a cooperation with makeup companies and perfume companies, and they developed fragrances for each one of the varieties that these growers had, so that the bride could choose based on the fragrance. I thought that was incredible.
That
That
is
was
really, I mean,
fascinating.
I can't even begin to wonder how they get the fragrance into the variety and how that all
Well,
happens.
the fragrance was there originally.
Okay.
The roses need to attract pollinators, and they do that with fragrance and with colors. So the roses, specimen roses that were in every continent 5,000 years ago, only had a few petals, but they were all fragrant. Many of them were fragrant, and many of them were pink. That's rosa means pink in Latin, so they were mostly pink. In the development of those and in the hybridizing of them is that we got to different colors and more petals and more things. But in the modern era, breeders took fragrance out because it was associated with less vase life. So if a fragrance was fragrant, they discard it and pick the one that wasn't. So we took fragrance out of roses. It wasn't that it wasn't there to begin with. We didn't put it in. We took it out.
I didn't know that. Take out the color,
Yeah.
not the fragrance.
Well, remember when florists were 100 miles away from their supplier, the supplier could grow roses that didn't need to have a shipping life and such a large vase life. But as growers started going to Colorado and then to California and then to Colombia, the breeders were under pressure to create varieties that could ship for 7 or 8 days and then have 20 days in the vase. And they had to take fragrance out in order to get that.
Wow. So it's not worth it, but it is a sacrifice. But I did
Yes, it is. It is. Well, now it's not so bad because you have a choice. You can get some varieties that have a fragrance. Sure, they're not going to be 21 days in the vase. They'll be 12. But you get the fragrance and you get the differentiator.
yeah, and the whole experience that's behind it. That's amazing. I did not know that. Thank you for that fun fact.
Well, there's one more story,
Yeah,
and I'll let you
please.
go.
I'm all ears. No, 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 no. I'm enjoying this so much. But please, yes, I love the story.
You've seen our logo,
Yes.
and I guess I can send you one of it. It's a design of an old-fashioned painted rose.
Yeah.
And so that has a real story to it. And it turns out that Josephine Bonaparte was the first collector of garden roses in the world. She had a home in the south of France called Malmaison, which happens to mean ugly house. And she lived there because she couldn't get along with Napoleon, and Napoleon was always at war and killing people. So she went to her own little farm down south, and she created the first garden rose that ever existed. And she had over 300 varieties of garden roses growing there that Napoleon would send whenever he conquered a new country. He'd send her varieties of roses. And she'd plant them. And a lot of these roses were not remontant. They weren't blooming roses all year. They'd bloom a couple of weeks in May, maybe a couple of weeks in September, some of them only in September. It was hard to put on a show. So when she had guests, she'd walk through the 300 varieties and maybe 3 were blooming at a time. So she got very frustrated. And she hired a guy called Redoute. He's a Belgian guy, and she brought him down to the farm for a full year. And all he did was draw every single one of the varieties she had in her garden so that she could show the people that came what that rose looked like when it bloomed. And he did these very detailed botanical drawings where he would draw the rose, then he would draw the petal on the front side and on the back side, and the leaf on the front and the back, and the thorn when it was young, and the thorn when it was old. So you have these beautiful botanical drawings of her roses, and those are still available today. If you go to Amazon, you can get the books, Redute's rose plates. They exist. And if you look at those drawings, they look a lot like our logo, and that's where our logo comes from.
That's really awesome. That's such a cool, and I mean, it's so frustrating, right, when you don't have that variety to show when you need it. What a great time stamp to just have that as
That's
like
right.
And
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. That's right.
Awesome. Who found it? Did you find that story? Who originated that?
Well,
Yeah.
as in the world of garden roses, you look at garden rose books, and they all talk about that story because it's
Oh, really?
famous. And there's a couple of others that you know what hybrid tea is? Hybrid tea is the cross of two kinds of roses.
Mm-hmm.
One is the hybrid perpetual, and one is the China tea. And what happened was, in the 1867, you had hybrid perpetuals, which were the coolest thing ever because they were what you call remontant. They were blooming roses that would bloom for the entire summer. Before hybrid perpetuals, you didn't have that. So hybrid perpetuals were a great thing, and they were reds and pinks and lavenders, but there weren't any other colors. And then these guys came back from China, and they brought these tea roses that had yellows and oranges and all of these other colors mixed together in a small breeder in the south of France, very close to Malmaison. And I forgot the name of the breeder at this point. They took the hybrid perpetuals and the China teas, and they created the hybrid tea rose, which we sell so many of now. Every rose since that moment in 1867 is called a modern rose, and every rose before that is called an old rose. And that's the differentiator, 1867. And do you know the name of this red rose that was developed, the first hybrid tea ever?
No, what was it?
La France. And the breeder's called Guillotte, and they're in the south of France.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of history down there when it comes to roses, especially.
Those are great stories that help you sell roses because it's just so interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, you wouldn't even think of it, and you can put yourself into, it's like a timepiece.
Right.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. That's so nice. So nice. Oh, I wish really all the best for Alexandra Farms. I know you guys are gonna get through this. We all are, but
we're gonna do our best, and we're counting on florists to be creative and sell lots of flowers. And we hope that a lot of the weddings are just postponed and not canceled, and that September is going to be a huge month for everybody. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I don't imagine. Yeah, it's gonna blow up. People are gonna have too much to do.
I hope so.
Yes. Well, thank
Thank you very much for this time, and for letting me express all these pent-up energy that I have for being 2 months at home.
Yes, I hope that quarantine is treating you well, and things are going all right at home. You being having to do homework or any kind of other special projects, or are you? Yeah. No, go ahead.
Certainly spending a lot more time with the kids.
Yes.
They're home all the time, and I guess we should take advantage of this because we're probably going to miss it when it's over, missing all this extra time we have with the kids, the non-commute. I haven't driven my car more than 10 miles a month. These are good things that we're going to miss later on, so we have to take advantage of it as much as we can. Yeah,
and I think that's such a great perspective, right? Because Mother's Day, like Jeff Fresh, we're normally operating every day up until the holiday, and to have the opportunity to work from home and to still try to figure out and operate for our customers is huge. So, yeah, no, but again, as always, thank you always for your support and for everything that you guys do for us. We're always
my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for joining us for this last edition of The Fresh Take. As always, take care, be safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful Mother's Day.